The cop pulled over a black woman for a broken taillight. But when he saw her FBI badge, Special Agent Amara Jackson stood out in the bustling halls of the FBI's Washington, D.C. field office. At 32, she had already made a name for herself as one of the Bureau's rising stars. Her sharp intellect, unwavering determination, and ability to connect with people from all walks of life had propelled her through the ranks at an unprecedented pace. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood in Baltimore, Amara had always dreamed of making a difference. Her parents, both educators, instilled in her a deep sense of justice and a belief that education was the key to breaking cycles of inequality. As a young black woman, Amara faced her fair share of challenges, but she refused to let stereotypes or prejudice define her path. After graduating at the top of her class from Howard University with a degree in criminal justice, Amara set her sights on the FBI. She excelled at Quantico, impressing instructors with her physical prowess and analytical skills. Upon joining the Bureau, she quickly gained a reputation for her meticulous work on white-collar crime cases and her ability to navigate complex interagency politics. Despite her professional success, Amara remained grounded. She volunteered at youth centers in underprivileged neighborhoods, mentoring young people who reminded her of herself at their age. Her colleagues admired her for her integrity and her willingness to speak truth to power, even when it made others uncomfortable. On this particular evening, Amara was driving home after a long day at the office. She had just closed a major case involving a sophisticated money laundering operation, and her mind was still racing with the details. The sun had set, casting long shadows across the Virginia highways as she made her way to her modest apartment in Alexandria. Dressed in a crisp white blouse and tailored black pants, with her FBI badge tucked away in her purse, Amara looked every bit the professional she was. Her natural hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her dark eyes scanned the road ahead, alert despite her fatigue. As she navigated the familiar streets, Amara's thoughts drifted to the upcoming weekend. She had promised her younger sister she'd help her move into her new college dorm. It was a bittersweet moment for Amara, proud of her sister's achievements, but acutely aware of the challenges that lay ahead for a young black woman pursuing higher education. Little did Amara know that her evening was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would challenge her beliefs, test her training, and ultimately shine a light on issues that had long simmered beneath the surface of her professional and personal life. The rhythmic hum of tires on asphalt was suddenly interrupted by the piercing wail of a police siren. Amara's eyes darted to her rearview mirror, where the flashing blue and red lights of a patrol car illuminated the darkness. Her heart rate quickened, a conditioned response born from years of awareness about the potential dangers black individuals face during traffic stops. Taking a deep breath, Amara carefully pulled over to the side of the road. She went through the motions ingrained in her since childhood. Turn off the engine, keep hands visible on the steering wheel, remain calm. As an FBI agent, she knew the protocol from both sides, but at this moment, she was acutely aware of her vulnerability as a black woman alone in a car at night. Officer Michael Brennan, a seasoned patrol officer with the local police department, approached the vehicle. At 45, he had seen it all, or so he thought. With salt and pepper hair and a sturdy build, Brennan carried himself with the confidence of a man who had spent 2 decades on the force. He had pulled over the sleek sedan for a routine traffic violation, a burnt-out taillight. As Brennan neared the driver's side window, he noticed Amara's composed demeanor. Her hands remained firmly on the steering wheel, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Brennan tapped on the window with his flashlight, and Amara slowly lowered it, her movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Good evening, ma'am," Brennan began, his tone professional but tinged with the authority that came with his position. "Do you know why I pulled you over tonight?" Amara's voice was steady as she replied, "No, officer. I'm not sure why you pulled me over." Brennan explained the issue with the taillight, his flashlight beam sweeping across Amara's face and the interior of the car. As the light illuminated her features, Brennan felt a flicker of recognition. Something about this woman seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. "License and registration, please," Brennan requested, following standard procedure. Amara nodded. Of course, officer. My license is in my purse on the passenger seat, and my registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now, if that's all right. Brennan appreciated her clear communication, but remained vigilant. Go ahead, ma'am, but move slowly. As Amara reached for her purse, a glint of metal caught Brennan's eye. His hand instinctively moved to his holster, years of training kicking in. Freeze! He barked, his voice sharp with sudden tension. Keep your hands where I can see them. Amara's body went rigid, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew the situation had just escalated dangerously. Officer, she said, her voice calm despite the fear coursing through her veins. I'm reaching for my FBI credentials. I'm a federal agent. Brennan's grip on his weapon tightened. Step out of the vehicle slowly, hands in the air, he commanded, his voice edged with a mix of suspicion and adrenaline. Amara complied, her movements measured and precise. As she emerged from the car, the streetlights illuminated her professional attire and composed demeanor. Brennan's eyes widened as recognition finally dawned on him. He had seen this woman before, on the local news, being commended for her work on a high-profile case. I'm going to reach for my badge now, Amara stated clearly, her hands still raised. It's in my back pocket. Brennan nodded, his stance relaxing slightly but still alert. Amara slowly retrieved her FBI badge and ID, holding them out for inspection. The golden shield gleamed under the harsh glare of the patrol car's headlights, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere that enveloped them. As Brennan examined the credentials, the reality of the situation sank in. He had just pulled over and nearly drawn his weapon on a federal agent. The implications of this moment began to unfold in his mind, a complex web of protocol, racial dynamics, and potential consequences stretching out before him. The quiet suburban street, once peaceful, now crackled with unspoken tension. In the distance, a dog barked, breaking the eerie silence that had fallen over the scene. Both Amara and Brennan stood frozen, acutely aware that this routine traffic stop had suddenly become anything but ordinary. As Officer Brennan scrutinized Amara's FBI credentials, a mix of emotions played across his face: surprise, embarrassment, and a hint of defensiveness. He handed the badge back to Amara, clearing his throat awkwardly. I apologize for the misunderstanding, Agent Jackson, Brennan said, his tone a mixture of professionalism and unease. I hope you can understand I was just following protocol. Amara nodded, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp and assessing. I understand, Officer Brennan. Protocol is important. However, I think we both know there's more to this situation than a simple traffic stop. Brennan shifted uncomfortably, aware of the weight of Amara's words. The air between them was charged with unspoken tensions, racial, institutional, personal. It was a microcosm of larger societal issues, played out on this quiet suburban street. Look, Agent Jackson, Brennan began, his voice low and tinged with frustration. I was just doing my job. The taillight, the movement in the car, I had to be cautious. Amara took a deep breath, weighing her next words carefully. She was acutely aware of her dual role in this moment, as a black woman who had just experienced the fear and indignity of racial profiling, and as an FBI agent with a responsibility to bridge gaps between law enforcement agencies. Officer Brennan, she said, her voice firm but not antagonistic, I'd like to believe that. But we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Would you have reacted the same way if I were white? The question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Brennan's face flushed, a mix of anger and shame coloring his features. He opened his mouth to retort, then closed it, the rehearsed defenses dying on his lips as he met Amara's steady gaze. In that moment, something shifted. Brennan's shoulders sagged slightly, the rigid posture of authority giving way to a more human vulnerability. I don't know, he admitted, the words seeming to surprise even him. Amara nodded, appreciating his honesty. That's a start, Officer Brennan. Recognizing our biases is the first step to addressing them. As they stood there, an unexpected sound broke the tension. The crackle of Brennan's radio. A dispatcher's voice cut through the night air, reporting a robbery in progress a few blocks away. Both Amara and Brennan instinctively straightened, their professional instincts kicking in. I have to respond to this, Brennan said, his hand moving to his radio. Amara made a split-second decision. I'm coming with you, she stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. This is an opportunity, Officer Brennan, to work together, to see each other as allies rather than adversaries. Brennan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, Agent Jackson, let's do this." As they quickly moved to their respective vehicles, both Amara and Brennan realized that this night had taken an unexpected turn. What had started as a tense and potentially dangerous encounter was evolving into something else. A chance for understanding, for change, for bridging the gap between communities and law enforcement. The revelation was clear. Sometimes the most profound changes begin in the most unexpected moments. As they sped towards the robbery scene, lights flashing and sirens wailing, both Amara and Brennan knew that whatever happened next would be a test of their ability to put aside preconceptions and work together in the face of adversity. As Amara followed Officer Brennan's patrol car to the robbery scene, her mind raced with the implications of her impulsive decision. She knew that involving herself in a local police matter was unorthodox and potentially problematic from a jurisdictional standpoint. However, she also recognized the unique opportunity this situation presented. A chance to effect change from within, to challenge perceptions, and to build bridges between law enforcement agencies. Pulling up to the scene, a small convenience store with shattered glass glittering on the sidewalk, Amara made a crucial decision. She would approach this not just as an FBI agent, but as a mediator, someone who could navigate the complex intersections of race, law enforcement, and community relations. "Officer Brennan," she called out as they exited their vehicles, "let's approach this as partners. I'll follow your lead, but I want to be involved in every aspect of this operation." Brennan nodded, a mix of respect and wariness in his eyes. "Understood, Agent Jackson. But remember, this is our jurisdiction." As they entered the store, the consequences of Amara's decision began to unfold. The store owner, a middle-aged man of Middle Eastern descent, looked relieved to see Officer Brennan, but eyed Amara with suspicion. The racial dynamics at play were immediately apparent. "Sir," Amara said, her voice calm and authoritative, "I'm Special Agent Jackson with the FBI. I'm here to assist Officer Brennan. Can you tell us what happened?" The store owner, Mr. Khalil, hesitated before speaking. "Two men, they came in with guns, took money from the register and some merchandise. They went that way." He pointed towards the back of the store. As Brennan called for backup and began to secure the scene, Amara noticed a young black man huddled in the corner, his hands shaking. She approached him carefully, aware of how her presence as both a law enforcement officer and a black woman might be perceived. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. "I'm Agent Jackson. Can you tell me your name?" "Marcus," the young man replied, his voice barely above a whisper. I was just buying some snacks. I didn't do anything wrong." Amara's heart clenched, recognizing the fear in Marcus's eyes, a fear she had felt herself many times. "I believe you, Marcus. You're not in trouble. We just want to make sure you're safe and see if you remember anything that might help us catch the real perpetrators." As she spoke with Marcus, drawing out details about the robbers that he had been too scared to share with Officer Brennan, Amara became acutely aware of the ripple effects of her decision to involve herself in this case. She was bridging gaps between the local police and the FBI, between law enforcement and the community, between different racial and ethnic groups, all caught up in this tense situation. Officer Brennan, observing Amara's interaction with Marcus, began to see the situation through a new lens. He watched as she expertly balanced empathy with professionalism, gaining the trust of witnesses who had been reluctant to speak to him. However, Amara's involvement also brought complications. When additional officers arrived on the scene, there was confusion about her role. Some officers were resistant to FBI involvement in what they saw as a local matter, while others were eager to defer to her expertise. "Agent Jackson," Brennan said, pulling her aside as the investigation progressed, "I appreciate your help, but this is creating some tension with my colleagues. Maybe it would be better if you stepped back." Amara stood her ground, her voice low but firm. "Officer Brennan, I understand the concerns, but this is exactly why I needed to be here. We're breaking down barriers, challenging assumptions. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's necessary." As the night wore on, the consequences of Amara's decision continued to play out. Her presence forced everyone involved, from the officers to the witnesses, to confront their biases and preconceptions. She expertly navigated the complex dynamics, using her unique position to foster cooperation and understanding. By the time the sun began to rise, casting a soft glow over the crime scene, significant progress had been made. Thanks to the combined efforts of Amara, Officer Brennan, and the local police, they had a solid lead on the robbers and had collected valuable evidence. But perhaps more importantly, perspectives had begun to shift. Officer Brennan and his colleagues had witnessed firsthand the value of diversity in law enforcement. The community members involved, particularly Marcus and Mr. Khalil, had seen a different side of law enforcement, one that listened, empathized, and bridged divides. As Amara prepared to leave the scene, exhausted but satisfied, she knew that her impulsive decision to involve herself in this local case had set in motion a chain of events that could have far-reaching consequences. She had challenged the status quo, pushed for change from within the system, and opened eyes on all sides. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but Amara was committed to seeing it through. As she shook hands with Officer Brennan, there was a new understanding between them. A recognition that this night had been the beginning of something important, something that could potentially transform not just their own perspectives, but the broader landscape of law enforcement and community relations. As the investigation into the convenience store robbery progressed, a secondary plot began to unfold, adding layers of complexity to the already tense situation. Officer Brennan received a call from his supervisor, Captain Lisa Morales, requesting an immediate update on the case. Unbeknownst to Brennan and Amara, Captain Morales had a vested interest in this particular robbery. Her nephew, Alex, had recently fallen in with a bad crowd, and she feared he might be involved in the crime. This personal connection put Captain Morales in a difficult position, torn between her duty as a law enforcement officer and her desire to protect her family. Meanwhile, Marcus, the young black man Amara had spoken to at the crime scene, was grappling with his own dilemma. He had recognized one of the robbers as his older brother's friend, but was terrified of the consequences of coming forward with this information. His trust in Amara had given him hope, but years of witnessing systemic injustice made him hesitant to fully cooperate with law enforcement. As dawn broke, Amara and Brennan found themselves navigating this web of personal connections and conflicting loyalties. Captain Morales arrived at the scene, her face a mask of professional concern that barely concealed her personal anxiety. "Officer Brennan, Agent Jackson," she greeted them, her eyes scanning the crime scene. "What's the status of the investigation?" Brennan began to give a standard report, but Amara, with her keen investigative instincts, sensed the captain's unease. She decided to probe further. "Captain Morales," Amara interjected smoothly, "is there anything specific about this case that concerns you? Any local elements we should be aware of?" Captain Morales hesitated, her internal struggle visible for a moment before she composed herself. "Nothing specific, Agent Jackson. Just ensure this investigation is handled by the book. We can't afford any mistakes." As Captain Morales walked away, Amara and Brennan exchanged glances. The captain's behavior had raised red flags for both of them. "There's more going on here than a simple robbery," Amara mused. Brennan nodded, his earlier reservations about Amara's involvement fading in light of this new development. "I agree, but what?" Their contemplation was interrupted by Marcus, who approached them hesitantly. "Agent Jackson," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to talk to you. Alone." Amara nodded, leading Marcus to a quiet corner while Brennan watched, curious but respectful of the trust Amara had built. Marcus's revelation about recognizing one of the robbers added another layer to the increasingly complex case. Amara now found herself balancing her duty to solve the crime, her desire to protect Marcus, and her growing suspicion about Captain Morales's involvement. As the secondary plot developed, it became clear that this case was no longer just about a convenience store robbery or the initial traffic stop. It had evolved into a complex tapestry of community relations, personal loyalties, and the challenges of navigating a flawed system. Amara realized that solving this case would require more than just good police work. It would demand empathy, discretion, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. As she looked at Brennan, she saw a growing understanding in his eyes. They were no longer just reluctant partners thrown together by circumstance. They were allies in unraveling a mystery that had the potential to shake their community to its core. As the investigation deepened, so did the relationship between Amara and Officer Brennan. What had started as a tense encounter during a traffic stop had evolved into a partnership built on mutual respect and a shared desire for justice. Amara found herself impressed by Brennan's willingness to challenge his own preconceptions. She watched as he interacted with witnesses, noting how he adjusted his approach based on what he had observed from her earlier interactions. There was a newfound sensitivity in his demeanor, a conscious effort to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community they served. Brennan, for his part, was in awe of Amara's ability to connect with people from all walks of life. He saw how her presence put witnesses at ease, how she skillfully extracted crucial information without making people feel interrogated. It was a stark contrast to the often confrontational approach he had been trained to use. As they worked side by side, poring over evidence and interviewing witnesses, their initial wariness gave way to a comfortable rhythm. They found themselves finishing each other's sentences, anticipating each other's thoughts. "You know," Brennan said during a rare, quiet moment, "I've been on the force for 20 years, and I've never worked with anyone quite like you, Agent Jackson." Amara raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on her lips. "Is that a compliment, Officer Brennan?" Brennan chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. "Yeah, I guess it is. You've opened my eyes to a lot of things, made me question some of the ways we've always done things." Amara's expression softened. "That's not easy to admit, Brennan. I appreciate your honesty." As they continued to work, their conversations deepened, touching on personal experiences that had shaped their perspectives on law enforcement and race relations. Brennan shared stories of his early days on the force, the ingrained culture of us versus them that had been hard to shake. He spoke of incidents that had made him uncomfortable, but that he had never quite known how to address. Amara, in turn, opened up about her experiences as a Black woman in law enforcement. She recounted the microaggressions she faced daily, the constant pressure to prove herself, and the weight of representing her community while also being viewed with suspicion by some within it. These conversations were not always easy. There were moments of tension, of disagreement, of painful truths being laid bare. But with each difficult discussion, their understanding of each other grew, as did their resolve to use this case as a catalyst for change. Their evolving partnership did not go unnoticed. Other officers on the scene watched with a mix of curiosity and, in some cases, resentment. The easy rapport between Amara and Brennan challenged the unspoken divisions that often existed between local law enforcement and federal agencies, between white officers and officers of color. Captain Morales observed their interactions with a wary eye, her own conflicted loyalties making her suspicious of this unlikely alliance. She pulled Brennan aside at one point, her voice low and urgent. "Brennan, remember where your loyalties lie," she warned. "The FBI isn't here to make friends." But Brennan, emboldened by his partnership with Amara, stood his ground. "With all due respect, Captain, Agent Jackson's involvement has been nothing but beneficial to this investigation. We're stronger working together." As the day wore on, Amara and Brennan found themselves not just solving a crime, but standing at the forefront of a potential sea change in community police relations. Their partnership was becoming a living example of what could be achieved when barriers were broken down and genuine understanding was cultivated. In quiet moments between interviews and evidence analysis, they began to discuss the future. What would happen after this case was solved? How could they take the lessons learned from this partnership and apply them more broadly? "You know, Brennan," Amara said as they watched the sun begin to set on another long day of investigation, "when you pulled me over yesterday, I never would have imagined we'd end up here." Brennan nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Me neither. But I'm glad we did, Jackson. I'm glad we did." As they stood together watching the fading light paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, both Amara and Brennan knew that whatever the outcome of this case, their partnership had already achieved something remarkable. They had begun to bridge a gap that had long seemed insurmountable, and in doing so, they were paving the way for a new era of understanding and cooperation in law enforcement. The investigation had been building to this moment. After days of relentless work, Amara and Brennan had finally pieced together the full picture of the convenience store robbery. What they uncovered was far more complex and far-reaching than anyone had initially suspected. The climax unfolded in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Amara and Brennan, along with a joint task force of FBI agents and local police, prepared to confront not just the robbers, but a criminal network that had tentacles reaching into the heart of local law enforcement. As they approached the warehouse, the tension was palpable. Amara and Brennan exchanged a look, volumes spoken in that silent communication. They had come so far together, challenging preconceptions and building trust. Now they faced the ultimate test of their partnership. "Remember," Amara said softly, "whatever we find in there, we face it together." Brennan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Together," he echoed. The raid began with a burst of action. Doors crashed open, flashlights pierced the darkness, and shouts of FBI and police echoed through the cavernous space. But as the dust settled, the scene that greeted them was beyond anything they had anticipated. In the center of the warehouse stood Alex, Captain Morales' nephew, surrounded by the stolen goods from the convenience store and much more. But he wasn't alone. Standing next to him, her face a mask of anguish and defeat, was Captain Morales herself. The revelation hit Brennan like a physical blow. His mentor, his superior, the person he had trusted and respected for years, was implicated in the very crime they were investigating. Amara, sensing Brennan's shock, took charge of the situation. "Captain Morales, Alex," she called out, her voice steady despite the turmoil of the moment. "You're surrounded. Please, let's handle this peacefully." What followed was a tense standoff. Captain Morales, torn between her duty and her family, pleaded with Alex to surrender. Alex, young and scared, wavered between defiance and resignation. Amara and Brennan worked in perfect synchronization, their partnership forged in the crucible of the past few days proving invaluable. Amara appealed to Captain Morales' sense of duty, reminding her of the oath she took to serve and protect. Brennan, drawing on his long history with the captain, spoke to her as a friend, urging her to make the right choice. The climactic moment came when Alex, overwhelmed by the situation, reached for a hidden weapon. Time seemed to slow down. Brennan instinctively moved to draw his gun, falling back on years of training. But Amara, reading the fear in Alex's eyes, made a split-second decision. "Wait," she called out, her voice cutting through the tension. She holstered her weapon and took a step forward, hands raised. "Alex, you don't want to do this. Think about your future. Think about your aunt. There's a way out of this, but you have to trust us." Her words, delivered with a mixture of authority and compassion, seemed to penetrate Alex's panic. His hand, which had been inching towards the weapon, fell to his side. In that moment, the tide turned. Captain Morales, seeing the genuine care in Amara's actions and the trust Brennan placed in his new partner, made her decision. She stepped away from Alex and towards Amara and Brennan. "It's over," she said, her voice heavy with resignation and relief. "We'll cooperate. Just please help Alex." As the rest of the task force moved in to secure the scene, Amara and Brennan shared a look of profound understanding. They had just navigated a potentially explosive situation, not through force, but through empathy, trust, and their unique partnership. The climactic event had not just resolved the case. It had vindicated their approach and solidified their bond. As the echoes of the raid faded, both Amara and Brennan knew that this moment would have far-reaching consequences for their careers, their communities, and their understanding of what it truly meant to serve and protect. In the aftermath of the warehouse raid, Amara and Brennan found themselves at the center of a storm. The arrest of Captain Morales and her nephew Alex had sent shockwaves through the local police department and the community at large. Now, as the dust began to settle, the real work of resolution and reconciliation began. The first challenge they faced was within the police department itself. With Captain Morales' involvement in the criminal network exposed, trust among the officers had been shattered. Many felt betrayed, while others were in denial, unable to reconcile the image of their respected leader with the reality of her actions. Amara and Brennan, recognizing the fragility of the situation, decided to take a proactive approach. They organized a series of meetings with the entire police force, creating a safe space for officers to voice their concerns, frustrations, and fears. "I know many of you are feeling lost, angry, and betrayed," Brennan addressed his colleagues, his voice steady despite his own turmoil. "But this is an opportunity for us to rebuild, to create a department that truly serves our community." Amara, standing beside him, added, "We're not here to point fingers or assign blame. We're here to listen, to understand, and to work together towards a solution." The meetings were intense and often emotional. Officers spoke of their disillusionment, their fear of public backlash, and their uncertainty about the future. Amara and Brennan listened patiently, offering support and guidance where they could. But the conflict resolution attempt extended beyond the police department. The community, already wary of law enforcement, was now more distrustful than ever. The revelation of corruption at the highest levels of local law enforcement had confirmed many people's worst fears. Recognizing the need for transparency and accountability, Amara and Brennan proposed a series of town hall meetings. These would be open forums where community members could voice their concerns directly to law enforcement officials. The first town hall was a tense affair. The community center was packed, the air thick with anger and suspicion. As Amara and Brennan took the stage, they were met with a mix of heckling and wary silence. "We understand your anger," Amara began, her voice calm but firm. "We understand your distrust. We're not here to make excuses or to ask for blind faith. We're here to listen, to answer your questions honestly, and to work with you to create real, lasting change." Brennan stepped forward, his usual confidence tempered by humility. "I've been a part of this community and this police force for over 2 decades. I thought I knew everything there was to know about serving and protecting. But the events of the past week have shown me how much I still have to learn. We're here to learn from you, to understand your experiences and perspectives." As the town hall progressed, heated accusations gave way to painful personal stories. Community members shared experiences of racial profiling, of feeling unsafe in their own neighborhoods, of the daily indignities and fears they faced in interactions with law enforcement. Amara and Brennan listened intently, occasionally asking questions to better understand, but mostly providing a platform for voices that had long gone unheard. It was a grueling process, but with each story shared, each grievance aired, a fragile bridge of understanding began to form. Towards the end of the meeting, Marcus, the young man from the convenience store, stood up to speak. His voice shaky but determined, he shared his experience of the robbery, of his initial fear of coming forward, and of how Agent Jackson's approach had given him the courage to trust law enforcement. "I'm not saying everything's fixed," Marcus concluded, looking directly at Amara and Brennan. "We've got a long way to go. But what I saw during this investigation, the way these two worked together and treated people with respect, that's the kind of policing we need." His words seemed to shift the energy in the room. While suspicion and anger still simmered, there was also a palpable sense of hope. A collective realization that change, while difficult, was possible. As the town hall concluded, Amara and Brennan proposed the formation of a community oversight committee. This committee, composed of diverse community members, would work directly with the police department to ensure accountability, provide input on policies, and serve as a bridge between law enforcement and the community. "This is just the beginning," Amara addressed the crowd. "We have a long road ahead of us. There will be more difficult conversations, more uncomfortable truths to face. But if we commit to this process, if we truly listen to each other and work together, we can create a model of community police relations that serves everyone." Brennan nodded in agreement. "Change won't happen overnight, but it will happen, as long as we're all committed to making it happen." As they left the community center that night, both Amara and Brennan felt the weight of the task ahead. The conflict was far from resolved, but they had taken the first crucial steps. They had opened lines of communication, acknowledged past wrongs, and laid the groundwork for a new approach to policing and community relations. The path forward would be challenging. filled with setbacks and difficult moments. But as they looked at each other, exhausted but determined, they knew they were no longer walking this path alone. They had each other. And more importantly, they had a community ready to work towards a better future. The weeks following the town hall marked a turning point for Amara, Brennan, and the entire community. The raw honesty of those meetings had laid bare the depth of the issues they faced, but it had also revealed a collective will to create change. Amara and Brennan found themselves at a crossroads in their careers. The case that had brought them together was closed, but the work they had begun was far from over. They realized that their partnership, born out of a chance encounter and forged through adversity, had the potential to drive real, systemic change. In a bold move, Amara decided to request a long-term assignment with the local police department. Her superiors at the FBI were initially skeptical, but Amara argued passionately for the importance of building stronger ties between federal and local law enforcement, especially in communities grappling with issues of trust and racial tension. This is an opportunity to create a model for community-oriented policing that could be replicated across the country. Amara explained to her FBI supervisor, "We have a chance to turn a crisis into a catalyst for positive change." Brennan, inspired by Amara's commitment, took on a new role as well. With the support of the interim police chief, he was appointed to lead a newly formed community relations unit. This unit would work closely with the Community Oversight Committee, implementing new training programs and policies aimed at fostering better understanding and cooperation between officers and the community they served. Their new direction wasn't without its challenges. Some officers resisted the changes, clinging to old methods and mindsets. Community members, while cautiously optimistic, remained wary, their trust still fragile and easily shaken. But Amara and Brennan pressed on, buoyed by the support of those who believed in their vision. They implemented a series of initiatives, a mentorship program pairing veteran officers with youth from underserved communities, regular Coffee with a Cop events to facilitate informal interactions between officers and community members, comprehensive bias training for all officers, led by experts and community leaders, a review and overhaul of use of force policies with input from the Community Oversight Committee. As these programs took shape, a new atmosphere began to emerge. Officers started to see themselves not just as enforcers of the law, but as integral parts of the community they served. Community members, in turn, began to view the police not as an occupying force, but as partners in creating a safer, more just society. Amara and Brennan knew they were at the beginning of a long journey. The road ahead would be filled with obstacles and setbacks. But as they watched officers and community members engaged in earnest conversation at a local park, they shared a look of cautious optimism. They had taken the first steps towards a new era of policing, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared responsibility. The turning point had come, and with it, a new direction not just for their careers, but for an entire community. As months passed and their initiatives took root, both Amara and Brennan found themselves reflecting on their personal and professional growth. The journey that had begun with a tense traffic stop had transformed them in ways neither could have anticipated. Amara, sitting in her office one evening, looked at a photo on her desk. It was a group picture from a recent community event, showing her and Brennan surrounded by officers and community members, all smiling. She marveled at how far they'd come. Her time working closely with local law enforcement had deepened her understanding of the challenges faced by officers on the ground. She had gained a new appreciation for the complexities of day-to-day policing, the split-second decisions officers often had to make, and the toll the job could take on their mental health. At the same time, her perspective as a Black woman in law enforcement had been invaluable in helping her colleagues understand the fears and frustrations of the communities they served. She had become a bridge, able to translate between two worlds that often struggled to understand each other. Amara realized that she had grown not just as an agent, but as a leader. She had learned to navigate complex political landscapes, to inspire change in resistant systems, and to hold steady in the face of setbacks and criticism. Her experience had reaffirmed her belief in the power of empathy and perseverance to drive meaningful change. Brennan, too, had undergone a profound transformation. As he walked the beat in neighborhoods he'd patrolled for years, he saw them with new eyes. Interactions that once might have been tense or confrontational now often ended in handshakes or even friendly conversations. He reflected on how his understanding of what it meant to protect and serve had evolved. It was no longer just about enforcing laws, but about building relationships, about being a positive presence in the community, about earning trust day by day, interaction by interaction. Brennan had also grown as a person. Working closely with Amara and engaging deeply with diverse community members had challenged many of his long-held beliefs and unconscious biases. He had learned to listen more, to question his assumptions, and to see strength in vulnerability and openness. One day, as they debriefed after a particularly challenging community meeting, Brennan turned to Amara with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Jackson," he said, using the professional tone that had now become affectionate, "when I pulled you over that night, I thought I knew everything about being a good cop. I was wrong. Working with you, seeing how you connect with people, how you balance empathy with authority, it's changed how I see this job, how I see myself." Amara smiled, touched by his openness. "I've learned a lot from you too, Brennan. Your dedication to this community, your willingness to change and grow, it's inspiring. We've both come a long way." They both knew that their work was far from over. Old habits died hard, and systemic change was a slow, often frustrating process. There were still difficult days, moments of tension and misunderstanding, but they faced these challenges with a new resilience, secure in their partnership and their shared vision. As they looked towards the future, both Amara and Brennan felt a sense of purpose stronger than any they'd known before. They had grown beyond their roles as an FBI agent and a local police officer. They had become agents of change, pioneers of a new approach to community police relations. Their journey had transformed them, and in doing so, had started to transform an entire community. It was a powerful reminder that growth often comes from the most unexpected places, and that even the most entrenched systems can change when people are willing to listen, learn, and work together. As the sun set on another day of community engagement and police reform, Amara and Brennan stood side by side, watching the diverse group of officers and residents mingling at a neighborhood block party. The scene before them was a testament to the progress they'd made and a symbol of the work still to be done. "You know," Amara said, a smile playing on her lips, "when you pulled me over that night, I never imagined we'd end up here." Brennan chuckled, shaking his head. "Me neither, but I'm glad we did." Their journey had reinforced powerful themes that resonated beyond their personal experiences. The importance of challenging one's own biases and preconceptions. The transformative power of empathy and open dialogue in bridging divides. The potential for positive change when diverse perspectives come together. The ongoing nature of the struggle for justice and equality, and the need for continued vigilance and effort. As they watched a young officer engaged in animated conversation with a group of teenagers, Amara and Brennan knew that their work had only just begun. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but they were committed to seeing it through. Their story, from a tense traffic stop to a partnership that was reshaping community police relations, served as a powerful reminder that change is possible, even in the face of deeply entrenched problems. It showed that when people are willing to listen, to challenge their own assumptions, and to work together, they can begin to heal the rifts that divide communities and build a more just and equitable society. As the block party continued around them, Amara and Brennan shared a look of determination. They were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in the knowledge that they were no longer just enforcing the law, but helping to transform it.